So first, Sony decides to basically fully get involved with Spider-Man 3 and turn it into a very disappointing film. And they own the rights to Spider-Man, and so what do? Oh, they decide to make anti-hero stuff with like Morbius, Craven, Adam Webb, and Venom. But before they do that, they decide to reboot Spider-Man after Raimi and them had plans of like three more movies. Can Marvel just buy the rights of Spider-Man off these people because they simply don't know what the fuck they're doing? Hey guys, how is everybody doing? And welcome to the Andrew Garfield chapter of my Spider-Man review series. If you have not seen it already, I have already discussed the Sam Raimi trilogy. I will probably have a card at the very end of the video for you to go watch that, or you can click off this video right now and go watch those so you get yourself caught up. And if you are new to the review series, and if you only want to hear my thoughts on the Andrew Garfield movies, I am doing a Spider-Man review series leading up to Spider-Man Brand New Day, which releases in theaters this Friday. So by the time this video is up, I believe will be out Monday, or hopefully be out later tonight. Who knows? Time will tell. But leading up to Brand New Day, I am going to be talking about all this live action Spider Man movies. And now we have arrived at the Andrew Garfield Spider Man films. And for me, this is kind of complicated because as the older I get, I start to lose a little bit of love for these movies. Now, growing up, I was just a huge Spider Man fan. I had no idea about movie drama, I had no idea about, like, you know, Sam Raimi's planned Spider-Man 4 or possibly even 5 and 6, who knows where that was going to go. I just simply grew up a Spider-Man fan. I was a fan of the Sam Raimi trilogy, and I was even a fan of the two Amazing Spider-Man films because I was just a Spider-Man fan. And, I grew up loving these two movies just simply because I was young and stupid. So I had no idea what happened with Raimi in them. I did not know this was simply a reboot. I simply thought that those three movies was the end. And so Sony decided to reboot Spider-Man because they wanted that money. But now, as I get older, I start to realize and learn the story of how there was a planned Spider-Man 4 and how possibly even plant an idea of a planned whole new trilogy from what I'm hearing. And so, as I get older, I start to lose a little bit of love for these movies. But I'm probably going to be in a little bit of the minority. I absolutely love the Sam Raimi trilogy, but I am also still a fan of the Mark Webb Amazing Spider-Man films. Now, yes, I absolutely understand their flaws, and I will get into them with this movie and with the next film tomorrow, but I still really enjoy these movies purely because of nostalgia. I remember the Amazing Spider-Man, this one, was always a movie that I constantly rewatched. Not because I was a huge fan of the Lizard character. He was kind of like the appeal for me. He was always the character that I wanted to see. I remember having his toy when I was younger and I played with it all the time. So he was the main reason I really rewatched this movie a lot. But, growing up, I really enjoyed this first Amazing Spider-Man movie. So this was a movie I was very excited to rewatch leading into this review series because it has been a couple of years since I last rewatched this. I don't even know when the last time it is. I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think the last time I rewatched this movie was when Spider-Man No Way Home was coming out. So it's been a minute. But as time goes on and as the older I get and learning the behind the scenes drama with Sony, because the story about this movie is that Sam Raimi and them had an idea of a new trilogy, and Sony and, a part of Sony apparently had helped Sam Raimi come up with those ideas, but basically the big heads of Sony basically just looked at Spider-Man as a profit. They didn't care if Sam Raimi and them came back. He didn't care if Tobey Maguire was back. They secretly had other Spider-Man scripts, lying around waiting to be picked up in case Sam Raimi and them didn't come back or they couldn't agree. Well, unfortunately, Sam Raimi and the production could not agree of what to do with the new trilogy or the new Spider-Man film, so they canceled Spider-Man 4. Ugh. And they decided to go in the route of a reboot, and they brought in a whole new actor, a new director, a whole new vision, a whole new universe, and all of that. People were pissed, just to say the least. But with all of that out of the way, I will also make this clear before I even get into the review. I will try my best to look at these movies as their own standalone Spider-Man universe, and hell, even a possible trilogy that this could have been. I will look at these movies as just that. I will try my best not to compare them to the Sam Raimi movies. There will be moments where I do compare to the previous films, but I will try my best to just look at these movies as their own. So, with that all out of the way, here are my thoughts on The Amazing Spider-Man. Starting off with my positives on The Amazing Spider-Man, and a lot like the other trilogy, the score in this film is a brilliant score in my mind. Now, I have seen a lot of people actually say that this score doesn't feel like Spider-Man. It doesn't feel like it's a very Spider-Man-esque score, because a lot of people like to compare it to, obviously, Danny Elfman's brilliant score in the Spider-Man trilogy, which I still contend is probably the best comic book score I have ever heard in my entire life. However, I have always thought this score was really good. This is always a score every time I hear it, I instantly think of Spider-Man. And for those of people that say that it doesn't feel like Spider-Man, I can't necessarily agree with that. Whenever I hear the score, I think of Spider-Man. I get those Spider-Man feels. I get that hopeful like feel that you're supposed to get when watching Spider-Man, that kind of adrenaline, excitement type of feeling that you get like in Danny Elfman's score. Now, it's not on that level by any means. I do think that Danny Elfman's is superior against this one and the next film, but this has always been a score that I've always really liked, and one that I just bit my tongue. Jesus. This has always been a score that I've always really liked, and a score that every time I hear it, I think of Spider-Man, and I really just enjoy it. So, I don't understand with people saying that it doesn't feel like Spider-Man, because whenever I hear it, I get Spider-Man feels, but I don't know. One thing that I've always really liked about these two movies, and it's kind of unfortunate that we didn't get a trilogy out of this, so it can have been completely capped off, is I really like how these movies and this movie uh finally show us Peter's parents. Now, I haven't really read any Spider-Man comics that, kind of revolve around his parents or anything, and the Sam Raimi trilogy never showed anything about Peter's parents or what could have happened to him. They don't ever mention a word. They just have Uncle Ben and Aunt May raise him, and even at the end of that Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man says, "I had a father. His name was Ben Parker." So we don't know anything about Peter's parents, but these two movies actually decide to go in the route and actually finally explore Peter's parents, and that's something I really like. Now, I don't really like how they kind of cap it off or where they possibly wanted to go with it, because we never really got to the end of the trilogy, so it's kind of unfortunate we never got to see where it would go. My hair's all messed up. I need a haircut, for fuck's sakes. So it's kind of unfortunate to see that we never really got the conclusion to where this storyline was kind of going, because there is a deleted scene out there. There is a deleted scene out there where not Ben, where Peter's father actually faked his death to protect him or something like that, and that was supposed to be at the very end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but it was ultimately cut, which for probably good reason. But in this movie, they just kind of show that possibly someone got into his father's work and, trying to get after him for something that he's exploring that he probably shouldn't explore, and he goes away for a while, and in this movie we learn that he never called, he never texted, never tried to reach out. He was never really there for Peter while growing up, and that has obviously shown that it has affected him as a person and, just growing up, not having a father like that, which he had Uncle Ben, but, an uncle's an uncle and a father's a father. There's differences there. So I really enjoy that these movies finally decided to kind of show us Peter's parents. We've never really learned about them. I personally have never read a comic about Peter's parents or, kind of revolving around that. We've always just known about Uncle Ben and Aunt May. So I really like the change and the addition of finally adding his parents and trying to explore that a little bit. Like I had mentioned, it's a little bit of a shame that we never got the third film of this trilogy, because maybe that could have gone somewhere. Maybe we could have got the ultimate conclusion of what was really going on, and, kind of like that whole circle moment. It's a shame we never got that, but what we do explore throughout this movie and the next one, I really enjoy that. And let's talk about the star himself, the Spider-Man himself, Andrew Garfield. Andrew Garfield is always in those conversations of even being the best Spider-Man. And honestly, I couldn't really argue with you if you did say this was your favorite Spider-Man or favorite Peter or whatever, because he is a damn good Spider-Man, and I've always really enjoyed Andrew as this character. Not only does he do a good job of having that like quirky, smart-ass attitude like Spider-Man does.
Crouch! Just let me go.
Is that a knife? Is that a real knife?
Yes, it's a real knife.
My weakness, it's small knives.
Just let me go.
Anything but knives!
but he also plays a very decent Peter Parker. Now, I understand a lot of the criticism about him being like a punk and a jackass as a Peter Parker, which I can fully agree with that. He is a bit of a punk for being Peter, which he is this like shy, kind of quiet kid or whatever. That's how Peter is, but Andrew kind of adds this like jackassery, jock type of feeling to Peter, which doesn't necessarily fit the character. So I understand why some people don't like his Peter because of that, and I am in that kind of group where I don't really like that. But his Spider-Man and his quirkiness and, kind of hard ass attitude that he has in this movie. I've always really enjoyed his Spider-Man because of that. He really embodies what Spider-Man really is. And not only does he just give a good performance as Spider-Man and kind of give you a new flavor of Peter, he also really has amazing performances when it comes to the emotional level. This was like right after he did The Social Network too, where he's brilliant in that one. We can all agree on that one. So to see him go from The Social Network and to bring that kind of but performance to Spider-Man, I've always really, really liked that, and especially the emotional side, like when Captain Stacy dies, the emotion on his face and the hurt on his face where he realizes that he can't be with Gwen because this might end up happening to her, and him being Spider-Man in a way nearly killed him, and how he has this fear that staying with Gwen is going to get her killed. And then even when Uncle Ben dies, the emotion in that scene where he's just distraught and crying and freaking out, not knowing what to do, and just screaming out in pain. That is a brilliant scene, and I think that even tops the Sam Raimi scene because in the Sam Raimi scene, you feel his anger, and I really like that. But in this one, you feel his sadness and his distraught and his just disbelief and anger towards himself because the last confrontation that he had with Uncle Ben, to where like that's because they argued and now he lives with that regret. That was the last encounter he ever had with his uncle, and now he lives with that regret, and then he goes on the whole mission of trying to find his uncle's killer, which I'll get into that later. But Andrew Garfield does an amazing job as Spider-Man, and I was so happy to see him come back in Spider-Man No Way Home and to see all of the love that he got in that film. Because there is always those groups where people are like, oh, Andrew Garfield's really good, or there's other groups saying where he's really mediocre, and hell, people even saying that he's terrible, which I don't think we saw the same character. But, and even trying to, after you kind of when you get casted in this character after Tobey Maguire did such a good job and he's so beloved by fans and by me especially, who that is my Spider-Man. Tobey will always be my Spider-Man. And especially when you had that trilogy come out where, people had just started watching them, they fell in love with that trilogy. They loved that character. They loved Tobey's performance, and to take up that mantle and to take up that character after what he just did, that's a huge ask and that's a huge thing to do. And what Andrew Garfield did, I got to give him nothing but praise because he does a damn good job. And he doesn't try to recreate anything that Toby did, and he does everything differently and, you know, by himself. And he creates his own version. And I absolutely love that about Andrew's performance. And to see him come back in Spider-Man No Way Home and to see all of the love that he got and how so many people were coming out saying how they loved that he came back, and hell, a lot of people said they were even more excited Andrew was back over Toby. That's how good and how big of a fan base Andrew has. And like with the Peter's parents stuff that I was talking about, how it was a shame he didn't get a trilogy. I am honestly sad for Andrew that he never got his trilogy. I guarantee you, if he had better writers, better directors, and a better production, he could have been an all-time great Spider-Man. He could have been an all-time great Peter Parker, and he could have got his own trilogy. Hell, I think that these movies could have been so good, and his Peter would have been better written, and could have had a better filmmaking standpoint to where he would have stood out more to fans. That he could have gone on to be the MCU's Spider-Man. He could have been the MCU's big, the Spider-Man that we all wanted in the MCU. But unfortunately, the writing, directing, the production company, they all kind of fucked him over to where we never got to see his own trilogy, and we didn't get to see him come back until No Way Home. And that really saddens me because he does a damn good job, and I feel like there was something there for a trilogy. And I feel like he still deserves that trilogy. Now, there's always the conversation, would you rather have Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 4 or Andrew Garfield Spider-Man 3, which There's part of me that would love to see Andrew get his third film and complete his trilogy, but I will always choose Spider-Man 4 because I loved Tobey and I loved that franchise. But I still do believe that it's a shame that he never got his own trilogy because he does a damn good job. And kind of going along with that, like I said, I don't want to try and continue to compare this to the Sam Raimi trilogy, but this is an exception for me because to go from MJ in that trilogy
What do you say we go somewhere else?
That's a huge bitch!
to Emma Stone's Gwen is a gigantic upgrade. Let's just say that because Emma Stone, these were the movies that made me fall in love with her as an actress, and I don't really know if I would love her as much as I do if it weren't for these movies because these were the movies that basically introduced me to her as an actress, and I've loved her ever since these movies because not only is she just a good actress, but her Gwen is one of the best Spider-Man love interests that we've ever got, and I think it's the easiest thing to say that this is the best live action love interest that we've ever gotten out of these Spider-Man movies. Now, Kirsten Dunst, she's always going to be the one I think of when I think of MJ, which I don't necessarily like her character. But when it comes to Emma Stone's Gwen, she's just an amazing actress, and she also is just an amazing love interest. And you know, Zendaya's MJ, I don't have the best love for, but I still like her. And not only is her Gwen just so likable and just a great love interest, the chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone is just fucking amazing. Especially since these two were an actual couple during this film. I don't know if it was during the film or after the film came out, but they were a real couple at some point, and you can definitely tell just by watching this movie because their chemistry is just amazing. And it's kind of funny that the person that made this also made 500 Days of Summer, and I fucking hate that movie. And I'm not joking when I say that. That is a movie I fucking hate with a passion. But when you kind of get a movie, when you get someone that made a romance comedy, and you kind of come in to have that love interest stuff with Spider-Man, you can definitely tell someone made a romance movie because the chemistry between these two is just amazing. Not only is the chemistry amazing, but just Gwen as a love interest in general is, again, probably the best live action love interest that we've ever got for Spider-Man. And a lot of people seem to have an issue with this and, kind of say that they changed a lot and it was just very small changes from the Sam Raimi trilogy. But I've always liked how this movie never tries to recreate anything from the Sam Raimi trilogy, and it tries to stand on its own and do its own thing. And that's what every reboot should do. Don't try and pay homage to the film that you are rebooting or trying to reimagine by any means. Just do your own thing and stand your own ground, and that's what this movie does. A lot of people seem to have an issue with the movie because it seems to add certain small sequences that are basically the same from the Raimi trilogy, but they just add different things, whether it's the suit, the non-organic webs, the love interest, how Uncle Ben dies, how they're all the same. It's like, well, when you think about it, this is supposed to be a comic book adaptation. When you're doing a comic book adaptation and it's supposed to be an origin story of how Peter becomes Spider-Man, what else do you want them to do? They are coming from the source material. This is something that they are adapting from a comic book. All the comics are pretty much the same fucking thing when it comes to the origin. I don't understand why a lot of people are saying that they just changed small things from the Sam Raimi trilogy. This is a reboot of a character that they are adapting from a comic book. There's going to be changes, and obviously they like. What do you like? Do you not expect Uncle Ben to die? Like, do you want him to get carjacked again or something? They do something different where he's trying to find Peter after the argument, and he sees the guy that just robbed this grocery store across the street, and he tries to stop him, and he ends up getting killed because of it. In the Raimi trilogy, he tries to stop him from stealing his car, and he gets shot. Sure, it might be the same, but it's different. How else would you want Uncle Ben to die? I don't, I don't know. And now moving on to my mixed aspects, and this is this is kind of funny to me. My one in mixed aspect isn't kind of it's not the film's fault, but it's kind of a me issue because this is something that just bothers me personally as a person and as the person that I am. This movie really dives into the science of the character and kind of the science of the film because this whole movie is about Dr. Connors kind of trying to get this lizard-like DNA so he can regrow his arm like what the character is. That's what his whole character is or whatever. But they kind of have Peter help him along and how we kind of learn how Peter's a science whiz, which that's the character, and I'm glad that they dive into that. But on a personal note, I am not a science whiz, and I fucking hate science. There is a reason that I barely passed both years in high school, because I don't get it, I don't understand it, it doesn't interest me, it's fucking stupid, I just don't like it. So to entertain me, I'd rather not sit and watch basically a whole fucking lesson on science. My science teacher in sophomore year did not fucking like me whatsoever, so it's a personal gripe for me. It's not towards the film, it's my fault. But now moving on to my negatives of the film, and I will fully acknowledge a lot of the negatives. But my first one is more of a nitpick, if anything. So after Uncle Ben dies, there's a whole thing. It's kind of similar to the first Spider-Man movie where he kind of goes on this personal mission to hunt down the person that killed him. And the whole, the person that did it, and this whole mission is he's trying to find the dude that looks like him, but he always looks on his left, the guy's his left wrist for a star tattoo because the guy had a star tattoo. And that's his whole mission for like a good 20 minutes of when he's fully becoming Spider-Man or whatever. But while he's doing this and becoming Spider-Man and doing this whole mission, he never finds him. And it's literally just dropped. He never finds his uncle's killer. He never finds the person that killed Uncle Ben, which I think is stupid that they don't do that. I don't understand why we never found Uncle Ben. We did find Uncle Ben. He's dead, Tanner. Jesus Christ. I don't understand why we never found Uncle Ben's killer. Like in the first Spider-Man, which again, I don't want to try and keep continuously compare this movie to the Raimi trilogy, but it's hard not to. But in the first Raimi movie, you have that like reassuring moment and that somewhat reassurance of seeing Uncle Ben's killer die. Like, you kind of get that reassurance knowing that his killer is dead, even though we find out it's really Flint Marko, which I don't like to acknowledge that. But in this movie, you don't get that reassurance. You don't get that, fulfillment, seeing him pay or get locked up or anything for killing Uncle Ben. And which it kind of plays a huge role in Peter becoming Spider-Man. When Peter becomes Spider-Man, him finding Uncle Ben's killer is a huge part of it. Either he spares him and just sends him to jail, or he kills him on a personal vendetta for killing his uncle. And that whole thing about Peter is what helps him become Spider-Man and learning his responsibility as this superhero. And that helps him learn that as along the way. But when you don't have him catch the killer, you don't necessarily have Peter fully recognize what it is to be Spider-Man. And that very small issue plays a huge part in becoming Spider-Man. Kind of a lot similar to Dr. Otto Octavius in Spider-Man 2. They have that, like, relationship in that film with Peter and Dr. Otto Octavius, kind of like this father-son type of thing. And a lot like in the first film, especially with Green Goblin and Spider-Man with Mr. Osborn and Norman Osborn and Peter kind of having this father-son relationship. They try to do the same thing in this film with Dr. Connors and Peter, kind of have this personal and emotional type of relationship throughout the film when they're like fighting or whatever. They try to have this like relationship with these two because Peter's dad was a very good friend of Dr. Connors, and they try to build that relationship with Peter and Dr. Connors, but I don't necessarily think it works, and it doesn't show at all. And it's like a blinking you miss it kind of moment of when they try to kind of build that relationship, and even when you do notice it, it just doesn't necessarily work, and I don't think that was a good idea to do it. Now I understand why they tried to do it, but when I was watching the movie, I was just like, this relationship stuff that you're trying to do, it doesn't necessarily work. And my final negative, and it's kind of like my main issue and why I think that this is a bit of a disappointing reboot, I guess I could say. This movie goes for a very darker tone. Now, not only does it go for a darker tone, but it also is darker visually. Like, the look of the film is darker. A lot of the fight sequences and action takes place at night, to where basically Spider-Man ends up becoming Batman.
where the other drugs going?
Because he literally has no moments where he's fighting in daylight. It's all literally at fucking nighttime as if he's Batman, which I don't understand why they did that. But this movie is not just dark visually, but tonally. It goes for this very dark tone where it's very violent with the lizard. Like fucking Peter gets beat up a lot. And you see it on his face, you see it in the emotions, and you see him with his attitude and how aggressive he is towards Aunt May or whatever. And I don't like that because Spider Man is a very uplifting character, a very bright character, a character that a lot of us look up to. And he's the most relatable superhero that we have. And he makes us feel hopeful and joy. Not this movie at all. This movie is dark tonally, visually, and the characters themselves are just have very rude like attitudes to where it's hard to get that Spider-Man like feel when everybody just, is mean. And just tonally, like, this doesn't speak Spider-Man to me. When I watch the Raimi movies, I feel the Spider-Man energy. I feel that Spider-Man type of energy to where it gives me hope and joy, makes me feel uplifting in the world when I'm down in the world. I watched those movies when I was in depression, and I felt the hopefulness in those films. With this movie, you would not be able to feel it at all. But overall, I really do enjoy The Amazing Spider-Man. I have a lot of nostalgia with this movie because this is one of those Spider-Man movies that I rewatched a lot alongside with the Raimi trilogy. So I will always have a soft spot for this movie because of that, but I do still acknowledge its faults and the issues that a lot of people have. But I don't necessarily think it's a bad Spider-Man movie. Is it my first choice when I think of a Spider-Man movie? No, absolutely not. But it is a movie that I can watch, and it is a movie that I can enjoy. So if you are a Spider-Man fan, I would say at least give it a try. But what do you guys think about The Amazing Spider-Man? Have you seen it? What do you think about it? Do you like this movie? Do you not like this movie? Is this actually one of your favorite Spider-Man movies? Or is this one of your least favorite Spider-Man movies because you were because you were very upset with the reboot? Let me know in the comments below and we shall talk about it. And if you like this video, like it. If you loved it, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you will get notified for all of my latest videos. And of course, until my next video, see you all next time.